whatever you are.
Welcome to another episode of the Double Digit Hockey Show. I'm your host, John Easthope, and I thank you for joining us on the show today. I am joined by a pretty awesome guest. The AJHL has announced a return to play action, so I felt it was good to go down that road and bring in AJHL insider, also voice of the Okotoks Oilers, and he on Twitter claims that he is the bullpen catcher for Sportsnet 960. So, Gino, welcome to the show. How are you?
Not too bad. It's great to be here. I love seeing all these new sort of podcasts and ventures by many good people like yourself, and I'm glad somebody just feels like I'm relevant enough to be on. So I'm really happy to be here. Got all night.
Well, we needed some AJHL news, and Riley Paul gave us some, and he sent me your direction to get some more. So we'll dive into that in just a second there. But I wanted to rewind a little bit. Obviously, the pandemic hit, and life sucked for a while. It kind of still
does a little bit.
So we went from no hockey to now with seemingly all the hockey. How excited are you that the NHL's back, WHL's coming back, and AJHL will be back ASAP here?
I think from a mental health side, before I even talk about teams, it's great for anybody. Even if you don't love sports, I think you have something that can kind of draw yourself in to get yourself away from the outside world that's very unpredictable. It was interesting to see. I know they had talked in the past, at least the AJ, this is what we're talking about, that they've been wanting to go since the shutdown in November, and they did everything possible to do so. Wasn't in the cards. Cases were skyrocketing, and people were sick and people were dying, and it kind of went full circle. I think when Canmore had 16 players that got hit with COVID-19, they've all seemed to have recovered and are okay, but that was a huge blow for the team that have actually, as of yesterday, opted out of the season. So now there's only 14 teams at the moment that are going to play, which kind of even things out, but makes the South Division that much smaller. Go from 7 teams to 6. So I don't know how the playoffs are going to work there, but that's one way to look at it. And I'm curious to see if there'll be some more teams. I kind of heard some rumblings that maybe a couple other teams may opt out. And I'll say this right now, there's no shame in doing that, because when you have no money, we know this when we went to college, it's really hard to do anything. So why would you fork on that deck to try and play? So I have anyone that opts out in any league, there's no shame in my books. So but overall excitement's there. I'm going to probably stay as far away from the rink as possible. I'll probably go in blind most of the nights just to see what's going to happen. I won't be checking out any morning skates or practices. I kind of have to change my broadcast tactics. I don't think I'll have much of like a pregame show this year because I was able to interview players when the reset with a full mask on, which was fine. And now I just figure, you know what? We're just going to go to the game. Puck drop's going to be at 7 or 7:05. We'll go on the air at like 6:55 and have a quick chat, and away we go. And we'll just kind of simplify it, at least until hopefully fall, when we can get back to some kind of, and I'm sick of saying this, getting back to normal, because it is what it is. It's stupid. So I'm looking forward to that with the WHL announced. I thought that was awesome too, because their logistics are a little more difficult than the AJ's, and obviously the AHL should be able to figure it out with billionaires supplying millionaires with funds to make this work. So, but again, there's no revenue coming in. So it's all intriguing, but mental health wise, hey, never better.
I'm glad you went the mental health route there. That's a lot of people tell me hockey's just a game, and that's my first reaction right back to those people. It's more than that for some people, myself included. Hockey is an escape. Football can be an escape for other people in various sports. So I'm glad you went there with that. I'm also glad you started talking about your broadcast a little bit, because that was where I was going to go next. How is your broadcast then for the Okotoks Oilers going to change with the COVID hitting? You mentioned no more pregame, less postgame.
Well, nothing will really change in the game itself. Have I been working on my reps? Obviously not. I haven't had a whole lot of practice lately, but I would like to think, and I guess this is technically year 10 with the hockey club, and I guess actually this is year 10 overall in junior A, that I can, continue to do what I do. I've watched a lot of game film. I've watched a lot of Chris Cuthberts in my day. I've watched a lot of, I've listened to a lot of Cam Moon calls. I've listened to a lot of Peter Labardius Insight. Those are just some of the people I kind of aspire to and try to be like. I won't ever be them, obviously, but it's just something that you look forward to, and you always got to get better. So that's something. Will I do anything totally different? No, but we got to make sure we tell the story. Like, that's the big thing. And I know a lot of people probably think I'm egotistical or selfish. I have no idea. If they do, a hater's going to hate, right? But I really I need to bring people into the rinks now because there isn't 100 fans. And I also, at the same time, when all this is happening, it's been a really tough go for myself and Okotoks to try and draw more broadcasts and get people into the rink a little bit more. It's been difficult at times. They had the long playoff runs. Yeah, it's easy to sell. It's super easy to sell because that's what everybody wants to go to. It's the regular season games against the, back in the day, the Calgary Mustangs and the Calgary Canucks on a Wednesday night. You're trying to bring people in. And I was hoping, I would hope with broadcasts, I got to try and bring them in. But now you have nobody's in the rink at all. There's going to be maybe 25 people there that are volunteers that aren't actually in the buildings. So this is an opportunity, I think, for local markets to really say, hey, we are going to be struggling. Hey, we have a good product and we can broadcast it to you. And there's the opportunities there for sponsorship and just take it to the next level. I think, unfortunately, some of these junior A leagues don't get a chance to because they are low budget and they can't really open up resources to get to that next level where the Western League can. And we're obviously the NHL and the AHL can as well. So it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to the challenge. I've got a couple of tricks up my sleeve. I got a little bit of a spoiler. Well, not a spoiler. I'll leave people at this suspense because it hasn't been confirmed yet. But I did have a very popular human being who is WHL alumni wanting to be a color commentator this year. So I'll see what my old color guy, he's retired and he's in Chilliwack. He's enjoying life. So I don't really want to pull him out of there. But if he wants back, he's it. So I'll leave it at that. We're going to have a special color commentator at some point this year at Okotoks.
Sweet. I'm looking forward to that. So it's quite interesting to see how different broadcasters are going about it the different way. I had Chris Cuthbert on a show a few weeks ago talking to him. I asked him how.
That's a good get. That's a great get.
He's amazing. Chris Cuthbert to me he's the godfather of broadcasting for me personally. He's the guy that I grew up listening to, the guy that I aspired to follow in his footsteps. That's the guy for me, is Chris Cuthbert. It was a dream to have him, to talk to him on the show for a few minutes that I had with him. And he mentioned that in the bubble that it was when you're calling the game, it's the same.
Yes.
It's the painting of the picture and the atmosphere that you have to get yourself adjusted to. But he says that once you get adjusted to that, it's just like old habits again. And he was really looking forward to continuing to call games. It's a shame he's calling a bunch of Toronto games because I can't watch Toronto as much as a lot of other people. But the craft that he brings, and we all aspire to try and do and copy his footsteps, is just as simple as it's still just hockey. It's still just a game, and you just broadcast it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how you paint your picture for the Okotoks Oilers and how others around the AJ do the same thing.
Everybody's different. I'll tell you a little fun story. Sorry, it's dusty. I've got itch. This beard, I haven't got used to it yet, and sometimes I get the odd itch. I'm not picking my nose like Glenn Godden was. So, but actually, when you go back to Chris Cuthbert, I have a couple really cool little stories before I go into styles. It was the 2013 flood in High River, and I lived outside there, still do. And he had like his prep notes out or something like that. And I just messaged him on on Twitter, and I said, "Hey man, is there any way I could get a copy of that so I could like look at how to do that? Like I wouldn't actually steal your stuff." But he said it was right during the flood. He's like, stay dry. And then a couple other times I haven't met him face to face like most of these broadcasters. I haven't seen him in the flesh, just on camera over a phone. And actually, when I did my thesis at the University of Calgary, oh God, that's been what did I graduate? 2015 there. And I did my final thesis, which was in communications. It was on rhetoric, and I did play-by-play. And I actually did a little study of watching him do the quarterfinal of the Olympic hockey tournament against Canada and Russia. So I love the way he works on that. So that kind of stuff, I just simple things like when Chris would say, "We'll step out," like yeah, well, we're going to step out for 2 seconds. We can all get up and go to the bathroom and be back after the commercial break, right? So little things like that. And just, I think some of the best calls I ever seen him or heard him do was that quadruple overtime game between San Jose and Dallas, and when he was on the Calgary Flames run in 2004, that Steve Monitor OT call was one of my absolute favorites. And just how it all escalated. But as a kid, you said he grew up with Chris Cuthbert. I did too. He was the late games for CBC back in the day. It'd be whether he's in Vancouver or he's doing the Battle of Alberta. So that was one really good source that I get. And Peter Labartis is probably right there as well. And I got to work with him for a full summer doing the WNBL on Shaw. And his preparation just made me look like a 5-year-old. It was the first show, and he never said my prep's better than yours. But he just said, hop on, son, let's go. And from there on, I've always looked to him as a resource. And you just kind of take snippets. You never want to be what they are, because that ain't right either. Like, you don't want to be a copycat. So I could go on and on for aspirations. Gord Miller and TSN's been good. Doc Emmerich is one that, always gonna, if you could ever, I have done hit the post with the shot. Like, I think everybody has tried it at least once, and it sounds horrible if it's not Doc Emmerich. So
that's amazing.
I just love like studying how people get to certain areas, like why do they get excited there? And you look at the rhetoric, your logos, your pathos, your ethos, and kairos. That's stuff we don't need to talk about today, though. That's all the so-called. It makes me an academic, but I'm not at all.
It might be a biased pick, but one of my favorite guys to listen to, if you're talking about a radio broadcast, is the old Peter Marr and how he.
Oh, of course.
During Calgary games, so it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So let's dive into the meat here of why we're in the conversation. We could go on, you and I, about broadcasters and broadcasting for a while here, but maybe we will another show here. But the AJHL finally found some ground, got a plan together, and are going to start executing a return to play. What can you do, or I guess I should word that a little bit better. Bring the listeners and the viewers up to speed on what the return to play is going to be like for the AJHL.
Well, I do have some intel that I've been able to speak with, obviously with the Okotoks Oilers. I do have a quick conversation with the president, Wayne Launger. We had a conversation on Friday when the return to play came out. I had heard rumors that it was happening, so that was no big deal there. What I do know for now is that the teams are actually in their second week of a quarantine at their own homes. The big thing is no billets probably is the big thing for a lot of places. You're going to try. It's not going to be feasible for some places, but for Okotoks it does. Most of their players are from Calgary, or if they're in a billet home, they're pretty isolated already. So that's going to be huge for them. So they don't have any complications to and from the rink. It sounds like we're going to have a 3-team cohort, so 30 players each. So you're going to have less than 100 people in these so-called cohorts. I know rosters are going to be pretty expanded. You saw, I think, throughout the pause, AAA players were signed that could have probably played AAA this year, but they get to go play a little bit of junior. Okotoks is not in a pickle, but Jack Works went to the University of Denver at Christmas along with Louis Jamrick, the captain. So that opens up 2 spots. And I think the leagues would be pretty lenient on how you're going to be able to add players and subtract, because you can't have affiliates. So I think you're going to be able to expand your roster. I don't have the full logistics there of how that's going to work. But then Canmore folding, we saw today, which would be whenever this comes out. What today is it? Tuesday, and they added this later on Thursday. So by then there might be some more players dispersed from Canmore. But today we had Dre Gardner and Dylan Witzke. They signed with the Whitecourt Wolverines on loan. So they get, and what I know on that side is that players from Canmore are loaned to anybody in the AJHL, but their rights are returned at the end of the season to Canmore. So we'll see what happens there. But 3-team cohorts, it's going to be interesting to sell. Now you're down to 6 teams. I thought Canmore might be in it, and I thought Okotoks, Canmore, Calgary would be at 1 cohort, but we'll see now how that changes. I guess I'm just for geographics, and the North I'll stay away from because I have no idea what's going on there. I know they had no cases before the pause, But with Okotoks being so close to Calgary, why wouldn't you do that one? But Calgary's the epicenter of COVID in Alberta, unfortunately. Edmonton was for a little bit, but Calgary's in Calgary fashion trying to up Edmonton and everything. So you have that. So I would think like you might see Okotoks, Calgary, Olds in a cohort. And don't forget Camrose, because Camrose is a far distance away and they're in the South Division. But then you have places like Drumheller and Brooks that are right there that are close. That makes perfect sense for a cohort. Or you're going to go Camrose, Drumheller, Brooks. That's a pretty stacked 3-team cohort. I know you're going to switch, but there's still a lot to work out there. And I don't know how it's all going to end up working the Saturday, Sunday. I don't think you'll see 3-3s anywhere. Maybe if you're doing Calgary, Okotoks, but that's kind of the big thing there. So I guess that's the Cole's notes. I know I'm kind of not going to be talking to players a whole lot. I'll be waving at them and maybe texting them or Snapchatting them or Instagramming them to get a comment, and that's how that will work. So for what I know right now, that's kind of what the AJ is going to is 3-team cohorts.
That's awesome. It's a good step for the AJ guys. I'm most happy for, and you might see it a little bit different than I do, I'm most happy for 2 groups of people. Firstly, the guys who are going to age out of the system. I'm happy that they have a chance to come back and finish on a positive note. And for those few that are looking at NHL draft / recruitment to big universities in the States, happy they can come back and put their talents on the ice a little bit. Who are you most happy for with the return of the AJHL?
I'm happy for the coaches. Obviously, the 20-year-old, I'll always stick up for any 20-year-old. That's a good person to begin with. That's a big thing there. And just trying to finish out the career, I look at a guy like Gib Cody at Okotoks. He's from Okotoks, so he's been home through all this. He's just staring at the rink he's played at for the last, like 6-7 years, and he can't go in and play. Now he gets a chance to put some closure. And just guys I've known for a long time, Zane Kindred-Schuck, who I don't know if he'll be named their captain. He's a 4-year Oiler. I've known him. Just guys you see in passing, but the coaches, I think this has been a huge wear. Maybe not so much the head coaches at times, but remember, when the pause stopped, they're still trying to get guys off to the next level, and we saw that a little bit with commitments there. Tyler Dice, Kevin Hasselberg, Ryan Papuao, it doesn't matter, Clayton Jardine. They're all still trying to get players to the next. They're always working. But when you don't have like that on ice to see players, and you look at the assistants that I deal with, like Reed Nadowich and Derek Perfield, they've put in a lot of work and time. And I don't know what their financial statements are looking like. It can't be that great. Not going to say that they are broke or anything like that, but money's tight, and it's a really tough time for a lot of people. And supplemental incomes to guys like me, that's my beer drinking money, because I don't make that much doing this at the AJ. So I'm not. I'll maybe lay off a little bit there, but as junior A teams are in a tough spot, and they're still going to be a tough spot after 24 games. So those are the 2 I look at. Fans, I'm just hoping come back and then they listen to me, so then they can understand that, there's a lot that's going on that you don't know about. It's not just walking to the game and yelling and screaming that the music's too loud. That's the one thing that I have a huge pet peeve on is, the music's too loud during warm-up. Like, the warm-up is not for you. It's for the players. It's not for anything else. Like not everything's about the fan for some points, but I do understand they're putting their hard-earned money to be at the game. So I'm looking forward to that. And I look at all these volunteers and just the board of directors for any team that have put timeless hours into trying to make a team successful, and they don't really see a penny of it most of the time. They brought teams into their communities and just want to see something unfold. And Okotoks have been pretty blessed. It's close to my hometown, and how I've been able to just kind of, I could just have a hop, skip, and a jump. I'm at my house and then at the rink. So I'm looking forward to that and seeing some people once again in players. So I'm in the same boat as you. Like, hockey's for everybody, man. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the music in Okotoks, people, how it claims it's so loud. Here in Lethbridge, our rink is notoriously quiet with the music.
It is.
It's like they forgot that there's a volume button, and it drives me crazy. So those that complain about loud music, I don't get it, because I'd rather have it a bit louder, because your warm-ups, and you're just standing there, and you can hear the players talking on the ice. And it's just like, well, okay. So I prefer the louder music to the quieter music. So Nonetheless, it's good to see that the WHL and the AHL are both coming back, both trying to make a go of it, both trying to give those players a chance to play some sort of season. I'm not sure how it's going to work in the AJHL, but I know the WHL, because they haven't played any games, are starting from scratch. The AJ got a few games in before they shut down. Are they carrying those records forward, or is everyone going back to scratch here to zeros?
I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately, John. I would think you would, because it was a pause. It wasn't a cancellation of a season. You haven't started a new season. Mm-hmm. So teams like Okotoks are actually 3-0 at the break, and Brooks was 2-0 at the break, and Camrose was, I believe, 1-1 at the break, and so on and so forth. I feel like that has to stay, because there was a start and it just didn't end yet. So if they do start from scratch, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to bother anybody. Like, well, we won these 3 games back in November. We need those points, but I think everybody's in the same boat. So if that's what we nitpick about in a 24-game season, I think we're missing the big picture here. So I think it's carried over. That's the one thing I haven't been able to really find out yet. It feels like it's going to be, because remember, it was supposed to be a 36-game season in November. So we would be just getting to playoffs now, I think, or close to it, if we were able to get going again. So I think it continues. I'll double check on that one for you. I haven't really intel on it. They're just trying to get through this quarantine. That's the big thing right now.
Yeah, for sure. That was more of a wondering question than anything for me, because I was just wondering how they're going to play that, because they got some good hockey in before the break. Like a team like Fort McMurray starts 4-0. It's not every year that Fort McMurray is what you would call a powerhouse in the North Division. So they got off to a really good start up there, and then the pause hit. So I was just more wondering than anything there. So you mentioned Okotoks and Brooks both started their respective seasons undefeated. That's not out of the ordinary. These two teams seem to always be there, always have good battles against one another, and one of the two always seems to be standing at the end. Is it simply just recruiting that makes these two teams powerhouses, or is there something a little bit more for these teams?
Well, it's definitely recruiting. Let's look at Brooks when I came into the league, how their program has changed so much. Well, a change is a weird word, because when they won their first national championship, which was called the RBC Cup back in the day, there was a lot of they got some really talented major junior players like the Cam McLeases, the Taylor Makins of the world. That was a phenomenal team. But now there's not many WHL tags on their players. They are going to prep schools down east. They are finding their American players. They're finding elite talents in Alberta. You look at Corson Kuhlmans, who could be a top 10 pick in the draft this year. As a defenseman, shocking. Brooks can create defensemen that are really good. So Corson Kuhlmans, I think, in Wisconsin is going to be interesting next year. But Brian Papua's did a bang-up job. He always seems to just have the right person or personnel, or the right scout, the right place at the right time. He found Cale Makar, I believe, at 15. Mm-hmm. I can't remember how the story completely goes. I've heard it a couple times that this little defenseman, who now might be, odds are probably on the Canadian Olympic team, just tore teams up in Brooks for almost 3 seasons. So there's that. The recruiting is so good for Brooks, and Okotoks has done a really good job as well. They've always tried to stay as Alberta possible as they can, but when they brought in guys like a Nick Blankenberg, who's playing his 3rd year at the University of Michigan, who's getting bites now for potentially being a free agent signing in the National Hockey League. My guess is he'll be a Detroit Red Wing maybe by the season's end, or finishing his senior season at Michigan, and maybe he'll be the captain next year. You always got to pluck from different places. And Tyler Dice is a really good recruiter too. He's really been able to pinpoint these younger age groups, like the 04s, where he has Bowden Singleton, who played at NAX as already committed to North Dakota, and Rick Lorenz was an absolute monster at like 6'2", and he's 16 years old. And he's committed to Denver. Jack Works was a really good find for him from his edge connections, and the list goes on and on. Jacob Bernard Docker, I'll be interested to see if he's an Ottawa Senator by the season's end, if he signs after North Dakota or goes into his senior season that way. Dylan Holloway, I could go on and on how good that player is going to be. Ken Holland won't rush him at Edmonton, but we'll see. They may have no choice if they don't have the cap space. They're going to need some cheap deals for a little bit. So I think Dylan might go back for his third season in Wisconsin, or maybe he signs a pro contract and he heads to Bakersfield next year. That could be an option for him as well. But to get back to the Brooks Okotoks and Brooks recruiting, it's off the charts. And you look at the rank that's in Brooks, I think it's one of the best in Alberta, if not like for junior A at that size. It's outstanding. Best concession in the AJ as well. An unbiased decision there. Okotoks is close enough to Calgary. Like you could play locally, but you don't actually have to live in Calgary, which I think is a really good draw, and it always has been for Okotoks for years. And Okotoks is a beautiful place to live. So there's so many different elements, but the coaching, you bring in good coaching. I haven't dealt with a bad coach in Brooks or Okotoks in my time. And even in the AJ, I don't think there may be a handful of coaches that work great, but there's some pretty high caliber good people that are good coaches in this league, whether it was James Poole when I first started Okotoks, or now with Tyler Dice and Ryan Papuano. It took a couple of years, but I finally got on his good side somehow. And the same with Boris Rybolka and Andrew Milne and Brian Kern and Drumheller before Kevin Hasselberg. I've been pretty blessed with some really good coaches to deal with, and that's such a huge draw. If you don't have a good coach, your program's already sank.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned the coaches there, because I was going to mention one thing about those two teams that I've noticed is the culture that those two teams have built as well. When you go to Brooks and you're part of the Bandits, you're part of a big family out there, and they take care of you, and they have a special culture. And not only do they win hockey games, they have fun doing it. And that's really one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is how fun the AJ actually is. A lot of them think of it as a rival to the Western Hockey League, where I think of it as a nice partner for the Western Hockey League. They're both great leagues, and the AJ doesn't get enough credit for the culture that they create, because they are a NCAA commitment factory. There is a ton of players that come from the AJ and the SJ as well that go down and play college hockey. You mentioned Mr. Dockers earlier in your statement there. What makes him so special for the University of North Dakota, and how do you see him fitting in Ottawa when he gets there?
Well, Ottawa's got some big decisions to make, because I looked at the lineup sheet for North Dakota's defense, and they have 3 defensemen that are drafted are playing at the University of North Dakota. So are you keeping all 3? I got a feeling you're not. I think you've got some trade. I think you got some trade bait there. I don't know if Jake Sanderson's going to be going anywhere, but to get to Jacob's point, he's in the driver's seat. That's the best part about being a college commit. I think in a situation like that is that, okay, I am a prospect. I've been drafted, and he's not a pro yet. So his NCAA status is still fine. He can play his senior year at North Dakota, and maybe he goes free agent. I'm not putting anything. That's just, we've looked at like guys like Justin Schultz, or those who have played their senior year because they didn't sign where they're drafted. It happens. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen in Ottawa, but maybe it does. I have no idea. I haven't talked to Jacob in a couple of months, and I don't ask those kind of questions to those people because it's none of my business, first and foremost. But for Jacob as a player, he's the complete quarterback. Like, he's the complete solid two-way defenseman, has a great shot. He could do all the things like the comparison was Cale Makar light to him. The year after Makar left the league, he did the exact same thing as Cale and won gold medals. They both have won World Junior A and World Junior gold medals. So they're good enough hockey players to be in that aspect. But I think with Jacob, his defending is pretty solid. Like Cale Makar can defend too, but I like Jacob's defense a little bit better. But the offense, obviously, that's Cale. Like, oh man, just buckle up and let's ride, sort of thing. But both have the ability, and that's what made them so successful in the league, to pick things up or slow the pace down and really dictate what's going to happen next when they're on the ice, and then people feed off that. And I think Jacob's done that with a really skilled team in North Dakota. The University of North Dakota is no slouch. It can take on some good dub teams as well if you can get to it. But the same thing, he is a complete defenseman. It'll be interesting to see what Ottawa does with him. can't say enough about the human being. One of the nicest kids I've ever dealt with in my life. The family's great. Little brother Seth is an Okotoks Oiler, and he's going to play for the University of Denver next year, so he might be playing against Big Brother in a couple of matchups on the other side. So looking forward to possibly watching that at some point. Hope in person, because the Magnus Arena at the University of Denver is absolutely awesome with 6,000 fans, screaming college fans, and when North Dakota's there, it's wild. It was one of the best experiences of my life. But Jacob is just one of those good defenseman. He'll be a quality defenseman that's going to play in the league for one long time. Look at Connor Mackey, a 2-time national championship winner at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Like, they're winners. They know how to win and they know how to compete. So that's kind of where I see is Jacob a top pairing D-man? I don't know yet. Is he in their top 4? Hopefully he is, but he's going to be an NHLer.
I'm a big fan of his. Anybody who is a defensive fan, look at the Ottawa Senators prospect pool. That defense in Ottawa.
It's disgusting.
It's amazing. And to think that Thomas Chabot's going to be that leader back there, and he's only 22 years old. So that is incredible to see that group there. Ottawa is pretty much set for a while there. So I wanted to get him in there because I'm not sure a lot of people gave him enough love knowing what he's done and the good comparison he was to Cale Makar. Now, you calling Okotoks games, you got to watch Cale Makar quite a bit.
Sure did.
We all hear how dynamic of a player he is and how good he is at that. But do we hear enough about Cale Makar for what he brings to the ice?
Oh, I think you do. I've watched that kid torch the Okotoks Oilers for 3 years. He single-handedly just won hockey games on his own. And those Bandit teams he played on were not terrible either. So he always had a good supporting cast. I think the big thing with Cale, and I'm just one example, this is the only example that I need. And Matt Rose, who was my color commentator at the time, it was game 5 of the South final back in 2018. 2018, yeah, that sounds about right. Game 5, the Oilers are up 2-1 in the third period, the start of the third period, and the Bandits forwards and defense couldn't do anything. Like, it's like they forgot how to play the game of hockey, except for one player, and that was Cale Makar. I don't know how many shots he had in that third period, but leading the rush, splitting the D, he'd finally lose the handle of the puck or it'd be poked away by Riley Morris or something, and he just buzzed and buzzed. They couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And then Makar finally walked in. There must have been like 5 players in front, and picks the only spot and ties the game at 2. And then Brooks would eventually win on a missed icing call and goalie interference penalty to win the series in 5. But that alone is like, that's the kind of player you're getting in Colorado. And I can't wait for Bowen Byram to be right beside him. I can't wait for that either. Like, I just want to see good players succeed. And the fact that I watched them, you walk down the hallway. I never got to interview Cale Makar. Not that I wasn't allowed to. I just, you know what? No, I don't need to. I don't need to ask you how you're doing because I know how well you're doing. And last thing you need to hear is, hey, you're doing really well. How are things? So it was one of those things. You say hi in the hallway, and he'd say hi back really quickly and just carry on with life. So give kudos to Ryan Popwell for finding him and Brooks, and the fact that he could have maybe played in the Western League for Medicine Hat. I would have been intrigued to see that too. It's interesting how good that Tiger team probably would have been if they had him. So there's so many elements, and that'll get the haters talking about, well, the Western League, blah, blah, blah. I love the Dub. The Dub is a premier league for developing NHL players, but the AJ has its gems, and it's getting better, and it's a development league. It's a premier league, and it's one to watch. It's if you're a local, if you're in Brooks, you flock to that CRA. It's an outstanding atmosphere. There are 50-50 pots for like $3,000 on a bad night. Yeah. Like, it's great. At their Centennial Championship, I went to that game. I couldn't get a seat. I was 3 rows back. They went through 2 50-50 pots of $10,000 in the game. It was awesome. Like, the best fans of the league. Some of them were the dumbest fans of the league, but that's okay. There's a lot of good people in that town that I know, like the Ken Flurries of the world and April, his wife, like volunteers, color commentator Nathan Crosby and Brooks. there's a lot of good people in a lot of places. Unfortunately, a few ruin it when I go there. They boo me. It's great. I love it. So, but it's a great hockey town. If you want to play junior A hockey and you get to play for Bandits, don't say no. Or playing Okotoks really good, I guess. I don't know.
I always bad talk Medicine Hat because obviously I'm a Lethbridge guy.
Yeah.
And so I was really glad when McCarr didn't come to the Western Hockey League because
fair.
I didn't want to deal with that 8 times a year. At the same time, Medicine Hat is a defensive factory. They just pop out defensemen left, right, and center. And they didn't need another one coming through that system. So I'm glad he went the other route. So one thing about Cale McCarr that I don't think gets talked about enough, and why I asked you that question to start off here, is his work he does away from the puck and how his hockey IQ is massive because of the way he's positionally sound and how he reads the play when he doesn't have the puck. Is that part of his game noticed enough for you?
I haven't been able to watch Colorado as much this year. I've had my eyes glued on the North Division because too busy and tired when I get home to just let's just see what Cale McCarr is going to do for another 20 minutes, which I've already seen him do when he was 16 to 18, and he's doing the exact same thing. He's just he just knows where to be, where the puck's going to be. The hockey IQ is off the charts. I always remember players always talk about trying to get him off his game in the AJ. And I know this is a long time ago because he's a second year pro. They try to see if they can catch him at the set and, coming through the tracks. He never got hit. He knew how to avoid checks. He's a smaller defenseman, but so skilled and knows how to get out of the way. And that's how the new defensemen are kind of operating. So he's adapted to the game. He's fat. His footwork is, and I'm not a skater, so if people are thinking I know everything about skating, I don't. But I know what bad skating looks like. I know what really good skating looks like. And Cale McCarr is a really good skater. His strides, his edges are just primed and perfect. Almost. I hate saying perfect because it's an overused word, but he is the definition of what a perfect skater could be on any given night. And you know what? He's going to be wearing a maple leaf again here, maybe next year, but we'll see. And he's the best player I've seen in that league in my time in the AJ. It's not even close. Well, Jacob's right there too, but Cale, what his magnitude, what he's brought to that league, it's almost like a folk hero in Brooks.
Yeah, that's another defensive group that's disgusting. Is Colorado. They have a lot of good defensemen there with Gerard, and then they have Byram coming. Richard get rich, I guess it seems sometimes in the league. So no, not so well. It's depending, I guess, how you look at it. So not so positive news on one end of the story, but on the other end of the story, it's a great story. Unfortunately, the Calgary Mustangs are no longer, but that has opened the doors now for a new AJHL club in the Blackballs, the Bulldogs. Your take on what happened to the Mustangs? How excited are you to welcome the Bulldogs to the AJ family?
First of all, I love their color scheme. I've been waiting for black and white for the longest time. I wish someone else would have took it, but they got it because I'm a jersey nerd too. I don't have as many as you do or Peter Klein has, but
no one has much
I really thought they might go with the Black Falls Wranglers and really take it to old school, but they went with the Bulldogs, a new look. I like it. They got a great owner, Doug Quinn. You ask for a guy that's going to put hockey on the map in Black Falls and that arena they built. I've only seen the virtual stuff. It looks it might give the CRA and Brooks a run for its money, right? So it's awesome. For the Mustangs, that franchise, you know what? And the Canucks are in the same boat. I know they've got a really good owner now at Max Bell with the Canucks, so I'm curious how that plays out. But it just wasn't working in Calgary. They had good teams too. That was the problem. They had really good teams. The last couple of years that Tyler Drader was there, and I think even when you look at when Derek Stewart was coaching way back in the day, he had the best first line in the entire league, and just nobody came to the games. I remember I would do a game, and I would count in my head during the national anthem how many people were there. It just wasn't. It's not a fun place to be. Playoffs once in a while, it was pretty good. But I know rink fees are really expensive at Father David Bauer Arena for the Mustangs. Fees, and you want pay to play on that. It's just not a recipe for success. And they just finally said enough's enough, and they picked a pretty good time to say enough's enough. If they wouldn't have folded now, they would have folded in the pandemic. That's for sure. So, there was Kenny Morrison was there for a long time. Tried to keep the team afloat as a president. Just wasn't, unfortunately, the minds and thinking caught up to the Mustangs, and then Doug Quinn found an opportunity to have an expansion franchise. He's signed a bunch of players. Do I know half of them? No, but I've seen them play. They're not bad. Doug will have a very competitive team. You forget he's the coach of those really good Red Deer, Optimist Chief, AAA teams that go to Telus Cup after Telus Cup after Telus Cup, and it's just a really good program that he built, and he's able to bring that over to Black Vaults. I haven't seen many Red Deer Optimist Chiefs signed yet, so I'm a little interested there or what he's going to have, but he's going to look from all over, and I think everybody's going to have some major junior. We're seeing some releases of 1-year-olds. Like, I know obviously Black Vaults won't be in it this year, but if they can get fans in their first year, man, that's going to be a fun place. I can't wait to call games there. And the best part, even more so, that their jerseys, their uniforms, everything's going to be nice. It's not playing the Mustangs. It's not a boring game at Father Bauer. It makes the South Division 1,000 times better. Like, even if they're average their first year, you're gonna still have to it's not free. It's not guaranteed win night at FDB playing the Mustangs. You're going to be in a little bit of a world of hurt when you go to Black Vaults, and I hope it's hostile. I don't know what the people are in Black Vaults. I know a couple of people that live there, but I don't know if they know that the hockey team's there. So that's beyond the point, and their social media has been really good, and that's the new wave of Junior A that you have to go. We can't just sit back, and I've preached this. Everybody who knows me, I preach this all the time. We can't live in the 80s or the 90s. I don't know what it was like. I was very young, but it doesn't work now. It doesn't work now. Like, the social media, you got to be on top of it. Creating stuff like this here, what you guys are doing. The Black Falls Bulldogs podcast, the Okotoks Oilers podcast or something. That's the wave of getting a Jumbotron. You're probably going to have to fork over and get one of those things and create some content and some money for yourselves. So Black Falls is doing that right off the hop, and they're going to be very successful.
I'm very excited to see the atmosphere they build in that building and how it rivals places like Brooks. It's going to be very exciting to see. I talked to their social media guy who runs that Twitter account.
He's a busy guy.
Yeah, off the record a little bit. And he's very excited for what they're doing there and what the owner's doing for that area of the province. So that's going to be a good atmosphere there and a good franchise, good organization to go for. You mentioned the Canucks there, which is where I was going to go next. How optimistic are you now with their rebrand, their new owner, and all that stuff? How optimistic are you that they are going to be able to make a good go of it in Calgary and stay where they are?
That's a great question. I don't have the best answers probably for you. One thing that broke my heart more than anything with the Canucks, getting rid of their traditional Canucks C and going with that's the only thing I just don't like the jersey. I like the color scheme. I wish they would have stayed traditional, but I get it. You're trying to draw in new fans and marketing it. I've got the degree. You've got to do things. I love their coach. I love Brad Moran. It's pretty cool that I get to see a guy named Brad Moran who just torched WHL teams. Like, I remember watching as a kid, he'd have like 4 or 5 goals a game. And Pavel Brendel on the breakout pass because he'd always cherry pick in the old days of the Western League. And he's a good conversation to have is with Brad Moran. I think he's a very calming presence. He inherited a gigantic mess from Darryl Olds. I would want to clean it up. I would have said, nope, not a chance. Brad did. And he's doing the best he can with it. I still think he needs some more time just to get his program where he wants it to be. This is technically only his second full season at the helm in Calgary. So he's getting there very slowly. It's tough in Calgary. But I'm curious with the pandemic now, if people aren't going to be going as far, maybe he can take advantage of that and have the opportunity to pull some really good Calgary kids. He's got all 4 quadrants to deal with, and he's got Okotoks Red Deer right there as well, and Lethbridge to pull if people want to come that way. He's signed from outside, so he has expanded his scouting. So I think he needs a little bit more time. When the Canucks are doing well, the league is hopefully doing well as well. So I hope they get in a good direction. There's some good people there that I've dealt with, not on a first name basis, but They're always smart. They're always friendly and want to know what you're up to. And that's more than I could say for some teams in the league sometimes.
Very excited for the AJHL to come back. Very excited for their restart, their plan. Hopefully they can get it going as planned. There's no more setbacks or anything like that. And hopefully the players are safe in doing so. Very excited that you were able to join me and talk about the AJHL. But before we go, I have to get your opinion. You are a Flame honk like myself. What did you make of the Flames in Toronto on Monday night?
Well, they finally showed up to play. I'm so sick of the start on time thing. That's getting a little old. They seem to start on time a little bit. Just assault, give David Riddick so much credit. How many grade A 10 Bell saves? How many Jacob Markstrom saves he made in that game? You shut out what I think is the Hart Trophy winner right now in Austin Matthews. He didn't get a point. Hurt my fantasy. I remember benching Markstrom on Monday night because I was like, hey, he's going to play, but he's playing Austin Matthews. He's got shelled his last two. This is a good fantasy night for my goal scorers. Nope, it didn't work that way. So they finally got a good effort together. It looked like they cared. I don't think the Flames are out of the woods yet. This is when you're an inconsistent team, you can't be bad all the time. You do have some consistencies that you're good. Sean Monahan, that is one thing that I was more, I don't want to say excited, but that he's able to, the backhander that he got over Michael Hutchinson to score, I was like, as long as it goes in the back of the net, right? So I thought it was just a really good effort. And they're still like, this is going to be an interesting stretch for them. The fact that you got two from Toronto, it kind of looks like Frederik Andersen may not be in the net tomorrow night. You open a huge door. If you can expose that, the defense for Toronto is getting better. Their offense is dynamic. Love it. Might be one of the best offenses in the NHL. You're going to you have an opportunity to really feast here because then you got 4 games against Ottawa. They are getting better. But if I've seen hardworking teams that are rebuilding, you score first, it's tough for them to come back, even though Ottawa did come back being down 5-1 a couple weeks ago. So I guess as a Flames fan, it's just same old shit, different day, right? So and I'm just hoping it gets to a spot where you can get over that hump. And Johnny Gaudreau's having a great season. I've always loved watching him play. You kind of have the big Eeyore size when the playoffs hit, and he's going to get traded. He's not going to stay in Calgary. And no one knows that. Like, it's tough to speculate where somebody's going to go. When you're going to get paid and you be closer to home, trust me, from a guy who likes being close to home, I'm taking it every time. So I don't have a horse in this race what Johnny Gaudreau does, but as long as he's playing for my team, or he's if you want to go from a business perspective, as long as he's on my staff, he's working for me. Until then, there's nothing I can do about it, and I hope they can do the best. I think this team owes it to themselves to prove that they can. And I'm curious. Mark Giordano had a pretty good game last night, and I've been kind of questioning his abilities as a leader when games have got rough. If he's ever going to get mad at somebody, I know that's probably not the kind of person he is. I'm not with the team directly. That's going to be a big thing for me, and I don't think he can fire another coach. I really don't. I don't think it matters if you got Scotty Bowman in his prime behind the bench. I don't think a new coach fixes that again. This team has been heavily inconsistent when it comes to coaching. And I've never been a big Jeff Ward fan. I've spouted that. People know that. I think he's probably a great guy, smarter at hockey than I am. I wish this team would actually go out and get Gerard Gallant. That's kind of my big thing, is Gerard Gallant or somebody that can reel this in, or else we're going to get a huge explosion. I don't think Flames fans are quite ready to do that just yet.
I posed the question to Flames Twitter the other day. Would you rather take another quote-unquote retool with the current group and go after it again, or would you prepare yourself to do a couple of years in the basement and reset the franchise? And it was interesting to see the mixed results I got from that question on Twitter. And a lot of people are like what you just said at the end there, where I'm not sure the Flames fans are ready for that. interesting conversation nonetheless. You mentioned, though, Ottawa. They are playing better. They are getting better. We talked about their defensive prospect group coming up. As we speak right now, they have just taken Montreal into a shootout.
Of course they have.
In their game. They're not the walk in the park that a lot of people were expecting them to be. Now, people are still winning against them, but their work ethic almost seems to be second to none. What are you seeing out of Ottawa at the early part of this season?
Well, I always try to trace back, like, when you're broadcasting and you start in smaller markets, you need to you got to kind of compare it somehow. And I kind of compare Ottawa to, just a
side note there, they just won the shootout.
Was Carey Price in there, or was Jake Allen in net for Montreal? Sorry, I'm in my back room here, so
No, that's okay. I just have the app up here, so let me go to the stats.
Okay, because Montreal has struggled. Like, Montreal has not been that great lately, so they peaked maybe too early. But
it was Price versus Murray.
Jake Allen's been really good lately. I'm not saying that Price is terrible, but Allen has just been a hair better for the last couple of games, and they wanted to load manage Carey Price this year. So I think it's a little bit Montreal. But to go back to your Ottawa question, I like Ottawa. I like what they're going to do. I don't really like the 2D jerseys. I know I went back to the jerseys, but Ottawa's jerseys have been a question mark for me for years, what they should actually be. But their work ethic, when you go to a team that works hard but doesn't have any skill, but they're going to have skill. Here's the big thing: when they're going to have the skill, like the Tim Stutzlas of the world, Jake Sanderson, Jacob Bernard Docker, the list goes on and on. They've drafted extremely well. When you don't have that talent yet, you have to put in the work. And I think that's just the best part of what Pierre Dorion has done building his team in Ottawa. When you're a bad team, or when you work hard, you are going to be bad because you're going to make some really bad mistakes, but it's not from the lack of trying. And I think that's the big thing that people need to remember. And it kind of reminds me, and will be a weird tangent that I'll go on here. My first year of covering junior A hockey in the SJHL, the Nipawin Hawks were in that spot where they were going to be extremely bad and they were going to lose a lot of games. But they had some really good talent before their deadline, and they traded all to get assets. But in that meantime, they were a bad hockey team, but they worked hard every night. And since then, Doug Johnson has not missed the playoffs. And that was back in 2010. So he's been to the playoffs 11 straight years. He hasn't missed the playoffs as a coach. And when you lay the foundation, culture, which again, maybe in Calgary, that maybe is a culture change might be more than anything. Instead of rebuilding a franchise, changing the culture isn't a bad thing. And I think that's what Ottawa has really started to do. And they're going to get to a good place. And I'm intrigued. That's my almost, I have the biggest scatterbrain, I think, that you've had for guests, because that's what I love about hockey more than anything is when people develop and listing players and how it all kind of, okay, this is why they did this, and now it's coming in because you didn't see what happened 5 years ago. They instilled this, or they changed the captaincy, or they traded this player out, and then you see where they went from there. That's just what I see with Ottawa. They finally have got out of, they knew they weren't going to be good. They were bad, and they were bad for a couple of years, and they struck oil when it come to prospects, and that's the best thing you can do. And now they're the bank because they have the assets and they can bring in good people and good personnel.
I love watching how teams are built, and wasn't that long ago that people were kicking in the teeth of Dorian. I'm like, what are you doing with all these moves? But now you see the fruits of his labors, and that Ottawa team is going to be fun to watch in a few years.
Well, his boss seems a little difficult too.
Yeah. He's done a tremendous job, if you put it that way, though. Like the way that he's been able to take what his owner wants and actually put together a half-decent hockey team. Absolutely incredible job that he has done there. I wanted to get your thoughts on the other team in Alberta here, but I'm going to ask it in a different way than other people ask it. Take McDavid and Draisaitl out of your answer. Ignore them.
Okay.
Because we know what they are.
I don't even know what else they have besides those two, but okay. I'm excited. I'm psyched. Let's go.
And that's where I'm going with this question is, do you see enough on the Oilers then to be a good supporting cast, back end, the wingers, whatever you want to see, their goaltending, are they good enough to continue to compete at the level they are right now for you?
Without saying those two people, I'll still say yes, because I love what Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Jesse Puljujärvi have done on their forward front. No Oscar Klefbom. That's the one thing that really stands out to me, that there's, you know what, they're above 500, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, sorry I said the 4 bad words I wasn't supposed to say, catch me if you can sort of thing. They're gonna be right in the thick of it, and if they can get on a hot run, it's just the goaltending is just it. If they could have landed Jacob Markstrom, where would they be? That would, like, I almost want to turn it right back. Like, would we see them where Toronto is right now if they had a steady goaltender? Because a good goaltender can hide flaws, and when you have two of the best players in the entire NHL at your disposal and under contract for so many years that seem like they're going to be okay, it's endless. It's a good opportunity. Like, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is having a great year at Edmonton this year. I think I have to give kudos to my friend Cam Moon, who his first ever NHL goal call on the radio was a former first-round pick of the Edmonton Oilers and first overall pick and former Red Deer Rebel Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I think he's been great. Like, your depth down the middle, McDavid and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, just Draisaitl if you split them up, and don't forget, there's a guy named Dylan Holloway that's going to be in that fold pretty soon. So they're pretty deep at forward. Now your defense, and you were talking about people ripping on certain players. I love Darnell Nurse. I've always been a big fan of his presence. Is he the elite defense that everybody is? But would you like him on your team right now? I sure would.
Mm-hmm. The reason I posed the question that way is to get people thinking of other players on that roster. And so you nailed it with a couple of great names. There's 2 guys on this roster that I don't think are going to get enough credit for what they do for the Oilers. The way that Jesse Puljujärvi has come back and almost reinvented himself to put himself in a position to be successful on the Oilers, I think is another reason they're having such good success there. And if you look on their back end, they're not going to get a ton of credit back there, but the presence of Chris Russell, I think, does go a little bit understated because he is a veteran presence back there. And in the absence of missing your best defenseman, you can rely on his experience a little bit. He's not the best defenseman, but he's definitely one that they can lean on for the mental side of the game to help that defensive group go forward. So always interested to get other people's views on the Oilers outside of those 2 monsters that they have just piling up the points. One last one before we close up here. Let's take a quick look on the West Coast. They've lost 9 of 11, and it seems to be a dumpster fire. Is it over for Vancouver for you, or is there still a chance that they can rebound here and get something going in a positive direction?
Oh, that's a tough one, because I'm going to go with one person that isn't named Elias Pettersson or Brock Besser or Niels Höglander or Quinn Hughes. How good has Thatcher Demko been for the Vancouver Canucks this year? It looked shaky, but every time I've seen him play, even in a loss, he has been a competitor. And you know who was a competitor before him? The guy he backed up in Jacob Markstrom. I really think Vancouver has something. Do I think they're a playoff team? I'm not ready to go there yet. I think they're going to compete and fight right down to the wire because they shouldn't be where they are. But then again, like, we could see Edmonton lose 6 in a row and every game 6-5, and we'd be right back where we started again talking. But I think they're an exciting team in Vancouver. They have some work to do. The fire Jim Benning thing, I don't really care who your GM is. He's done his work. He drafted Quinn Hughes. He signed his players. He's going to lay in that bed that he made. But sign Travis Green. Like, he has been outstanding. There's a guy where their system of going through the AHL and finding a high caliber coach seems to have worked out for Travis Green. But I'm not going to go there yet that they're going to turn this around. But I think they're going to be in a spot where well, at least we tried, and we did turn it around enough to give faith to Vancouver. There is a future. It's hard that they're unable to benefit from not having a cheap Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, which has been talked before. I hate repeating what other people say on shows, but that's really where we're at. That's the only disappointment, that they maybe don't get a playoff without them being cheap and see how far they can go. But there's time to do that. Sign them to your max, keep them in your core, and then just start working from that side as well. What GM's available right now that wants to take that job? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want that mess, to be honest. They got a lot of bad deals on the bottom 6 of their roster, so interesting. North Division is fun. North Division is fun to watch. It's going to go down to the wire for a lot of these playoff spots. Really, Toronto's the only team that's probably in the playoffs right now that'll still be there. So interesting to see how that's going to come down the stretch there. Gino, this has been a lot of fun, a lot of good insight on the AJHL. I appreciate your insight and for joining me today, taking up the time. I also appreciate you being a little bit flexible on the time that I originally set, so I appreciate that. Thanks for joining me here on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. This was so much fun. I don't get to do much of this right now. I'm a bullpen catcher for the Fan. The phone. I'm sitting at the phone waiting for the phone call, but the phone never rings. So I'll take any opportunities like this anytime. I think it's great what people like yourselves are doing, and keep doing it, man. Like, that's all I can say. Like, just keep doing what you're doing, and things are going to be awesome. And hockey's back, man. So let's enjoy that. And I can't wait to come back again soon if you want.
Absolutely. We'll definitely hit on your door again, because AJ ain't going anywhere for a while, I don't think. So it's going to be fun to dive into this.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks everyone for joining me here on the Double Digit Hockey Show. Don't forget to find me on social media at VintageJohnny84. And thanks for tuning in on another edition of the Double Digit Hockey Show. Have a good night.